Shalom, ladies and gentlemen. This is Avi Ben Mordechai, and you are tuned into Torah on Location. On our episode of Torah on Location from Eretz Israel, we are going to be studying the concept of Scripture's 1-to-4 ratio. It's coming up next into understanding the nuances of the Hebrew text and what it's trying to convey to us in the Genesis creation story, as well as all through the Tanakh, on a 1-to-4 ratio. Join us next for Torah on Location. To take a look at the language of numbers and continue our study as we delve into an idea called the 1-to-4 ratio. Scripture contains a number of these anomalies, a 1-to-4 ratio. And I want to show these things to you because whether you are a mathematician, maybe you're into physics and science, or maybe you just love to study the Bible and you don't have any particular discipline in any of the higher forms of academics, it doesn't matter. You're going to find that the all-eternal one of heaven and earth is a mathematician. He is the great mathematician, and math seems to be his favorite subject. So we're going to take a look at that today. I would like you to turn now to Genesis chapter 2 and verses 8 through 9, if you would, please. Yehovah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground Yehovah Elohim made every tree to grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Here you have two trees, and here you have a man. Now, those of us that have studied the Bible for any length of time, we find a very interesting scenario developing as we look through the creation story of the book of Genesis. Here in Genesis 2:8, as we stated to you just a moment ago, it says, Yehovah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Now the Hebrew word that is showing up here in this text is yatzar. Yatzar. That is Yud Tzadi Resh. Yud Tzadi Resh. Yatzar. But this is different. This creation in Genesis 2:8 seems to be very different from the one that we're normally used to looking at in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Let's take a look at that one together. Genesis 1:26. Then Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the ground." Verse 27. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim, he created him, male and female, he created them. Now, do you notice something interesting here? This creation story in Genesis 1, verse 26 and into 27, appears to be a little bit different than Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. Genesis 2, verse 8 talks about a man that he places in the garden, a man that he forms, Yatzar. Whereas in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, this man is created, that is, bara, Beit Resh Aleph, bara. But not only that, but this man in Genesis 1:26 is the sixth day, whereas the man in Genesis 2:8 is the third day. Now you may look at that and say, oh, come on, Avi, how can you possibly say that's the third day? Look carefully at the text. You will notice there's an anomaly going on here because of all of the descriptions of this creation story. It does not appear to be the sixth day at all, because in this particular story, we have a creation of herbs and greens and trees, and those things were all brought out on the third day, not the sixth day. And you look at that and say, never noticed that before. Do notice it. Take a careful and close look, examination into it, because this, on the third day, is going to explain so much of the gospel narratives and Yeshua's work, his teaching, his ministry, and what the kingdom of heaven is all about, and why Yeshua has to die and resurrect on the third day. Oh, there is so much that we can learn from Genesis chapter 2 and also Genesis chapter 1. So get ready for some interesting understanding into these words, this narrative, and dare I say, put your seatbelt on. We're in for an interesting ride. Turn, if you will, please, now to Genesis chapter 2, verse 9, as we are looking at the center of the Garden of Eden. That is the center. It is called in Hebrew, Betoch Hagan. Betoch Hagan, literally in the midst or in the middle of the garden. The middle is a place that you always want to understand it in light of the Torah. For example, take a look at a Torah scroll. Here's one on your screen. Where do you see the word manifested? Do you see it on the left? No. Do you see it on the right? No. Where do you see it? Betoch HaTorah, in the middle of the Torah, right here, the middle. This is Betoch, and the same thing appears in the Garden of Eden. Okay? You have the midst of the garden, there is the tree of life. In the same way that the words of this holy writ of Scripture is in the middle between these two trees, right in the middle. Let's turn now to Genesis chapter 2, verse 9 here for a little more context. Out of the ground, Yehovah Elohim made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The first tree that is mentioned is called Etz HaChaim. Etz HaChaim, that is, the tree of life. Now this is very interesting when it comes to its numeric valuation. Etz HaChaim has a numeric value of 233. Why is that important? I'll tell you why. The tree of life has this idea of being the perfect picture of life for our soul. 233. Add 2 plus 3 plus 3. What do you get? 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 3 is 8. The word in Hebrew for life is what? Chaim. Chaim. Chaim is life. So is it any surprise to any of us that we have in the center of the Garden of Eden the tree of life, the Etz HaChaim, with a numeric value of 233. When you break out the 233 and add a 2 plus 3 plus 3, it equals 8, which is 8 of the perfection and the new life that has been given to us by Yehovah for man in the garden. But there's more to this story than meets the eye. Because also, in the Garden of Eden, there is yet another tree that we're told about here. It says, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That is the Etz Da'at Tov V'Ra. Etz Da'at Tov V'Ra. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I'm not going to be addressing the theological implications of this tree on this study. We will do that in a future program. What I'm trying to draw your attention to here is the numeric valuation of the term Etz Da'at Tov V'Ra. That is, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now I went through the Hebrew and I added it up. All the letters that make up this phrase, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Do you know what the numeric value is? You're saying, oh, please do tell us. It's 932. 932. What does this tell us? That when you multiply the tree of life in 4 different directions, you arrive at Etz Da'at Tov V'Ra, the value of it anyway, which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, there's a lesson here we can derive from this, and if we turn to Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 19 through 20, it might give us a little bit of a clue. Let's go there now, please. I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both you and your seed or descendants may live, that you may love Yehovah your Elohim, that you may obey his voice, and that you may cling to him, the Hebrew word davak, that you may glue yourself to him, for he is your life and your length of days, and that you may dwell in the land which Yehovah swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, to give them. So we have a command to choose 233, which is the idea of the tree of life. Choose life. Choose the Torah. The Torah is our life, and the tree of life is, in fact, the development and the manifestation of the fruit of the Torah, the fruit of the Spirit. 233, we are to choose life. What I want to do here now is take us to Matthew, chapter 7, verses 13 through 14. Let's go there together, please. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. We have here the narrow gate and the broad gate, the narrow road and the broad road. Which road will you travel? We see a rather interesting story that Yeshua teaches here regarding entering into the kingdom of heaven. And he says to us here that there are going to be many people who will come to him and say, Master, Master, did we not do this in your name? Did we not do that in your name? Did we not do great and marvelous, wonderful things in your name? And we went and made converts all over the world, and we got big missionary programs going, and we had wonderful music, and we had great instruction, we had large Sunday schools, and we had this and this and this and this and this, and the list goes on and on. And what is he going to say to all of these people who have boasted of these great programs? Jews, Christians, Messianics, I don't care. What is he going to say to all these people that have boasted all these great programs all through the centuries and the millennia? He will say to them, I do not know you. I don't know where you're from. Verse 27. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity. And what is iniquity? We know what it is. It's not obeying and listening to the Torah. Exactly what Proverbs chapter 28 verse 9 says, that even if we do not obey and listen to the Torah, even our prayer is an abomination. Oy, ay, ay. So, we need to get our act together, folks, and pay attention and find out what the heart of the Father really is looking for in our lives. Now let's continue on. Verse 28. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham and Isaac and Yaakov and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim, and yourselves thrust out. Verse 29. They will come from the east and the west, from the north and the south. There are your 4 directions in the kingdom. The 4 directions. They will come from the east and the west, from the north and the south, and sit down in the kingdom of Elohim. This is exactly what Yeshua was identifying when he was bringing us back to the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. And the fact that the Etz HaChaim, the tree of life, 233 in its Gematria, times 4 equals 932. And 932 is the numeric evaluation, the numeric number for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Thus, Yeshua is saying, if you want to enter into life, you have to choose life. But if you don't choose life, and you try to come in through the 4 corners into life some other way, some other direction, you want to climb over a hill, climb over a fence, climb over a mountain, you want to come in some other door, you want to make up your own rules. According to Matthew 7 and Luke 12, if you want to make up your own rules, you're choosing the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says, choose life in Deuteronomy chapter 30. Choose life. All this being said, let us now return back to the Genesis creation story at verse 4, and let's go over here to verse 6, please. This is the history or the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that Jehovah Elohim made the earth and the heavens. Now notice verse 5. Before any plant of the field was in the earth or the land, and before any herb of the field had grown. That's a fascinating word. The word before is terem in Hebrew, terem. terem is a word in Hebrew that refers to time. In other words, A before B. You have B, but before B you have to have A. Or if you want to put it in Hebrew, you have the Tav, you have the Aleph and the Tav. But before the Tav comes the Aleph. Therefore, that is called terem. Aleph comes before Tav in time. Therefore, that's the Hebrew word terem. And we're not going to get bogged down in this right at this moment, this concept of terem, but we will be coming back to this in a future study. Oh, trust me, we will. But let's move on and deal with what is happening here in Genesis 2, verse 6. It says in verse 5 that Yehovah Elohim had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. There was no Adam to cultivate the Adamah of the ground. And so verse 6 says, a mist went up from the land and watered the whole face of the Adamah. Now, what in the world is this mist that we're dealing with here? This is part of that 1-to-4 ratio where you have 1 and you have 4. A 1-to-4. Take a look at the word for mist in Hebrew, or the vapor that appears here in the text, and you will see it is the word ad, Aleph, Dalet. Aleph, Dalet. And here in the text it tells us ve'ad, that is, a mist went up from the land and it watered the whole face of the Adamah. We learn from Scripture that man is but a vapor. The research that I have studied has shown me that man is essentially made up of about 50 to 65% water. We are a water-based organic creature. 50 to 65% of us, we have water. This water vapor that we see coming off of us, you can especially see it in action when you're breathing out on a cold day. And those of you that live in cold climates, when you're breathing out, you see the water vapor coming out of our breath. That is, the breath contains spirit. It's breathing. We have a breathing apparatus via the lungs. And this breathing apparatus is constantly taking in moisture and it's pushing out moisture. Because it is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, that Yehovah Elohim formed man of the dust of the Adamah, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being, a living soul. Man is inhaling and man is exhaling water. Not the water that we understand necessarily, but it's a spiritual water. It's breath. It is a water, a vapor, a mist. It is ad, and it comes up from the Adamah. Adam was formed from the dust of the earth, of the Adamah, and we had the breath of life from the mist that was in the Adamah, and it came into us from the earth. So we have a mist, we have a vapor inside of us that is being inhaled and exhaled. And this mist has a 1-to-4 ratio. The Aleph is 1, the Dalet is 4. We're going from 1 to 4. And inside of the 1 is the Aleph. That is the Yehovah, that is Yehovah's image in us. And the 4 is the door. That's the Dalet. We go through the door of life to arrive at the Aleph. Go through the water or the mist, the breath of the Ruach HaKodesh, That is the breath of life. That's the animation force of our life. That is the spirit. That's the water of the word. And we go through the door, the dalet in the word ad, and through the door it takes us to the aleph. That is the beginning of all creation, where all things are given to us through the aleph. So we have aleph dalet, and that performs the role of bringing us the breath or the mist in our breathing apparatus spiritually. Also, of course, physically, but spiritually is the key here. However, we're not done here. Now take aleph and dalet, that is the beginning and the door, and add a final mem, that is the Hebrew letter mem. Add it to the word. And what do you get? You get the word Adam. Adam is man. That is, Adam becomes the manifestation of the aleph through the door. That is, the door to the tree of life. We become the manifestation. We're Adam. And that dalet is the key that opens up the door to the mem. And what does the mem represent? Even in Paleo Hebrew, mem always represents water. That's the pictograph for it in ancient Hebrew. Water. Mem is coming from the waters above. The waters above, the waters below. The waters above and the waters below. That's in the creation story of the book of Genesis. And what are the waters above? Those are the spiritual waters of the Word. And the waters below, those are additional waters that are coming through the mist. In the text of Genesis chapter 2, verse 10, it says, a river, singular, one river, went out of Eden to water the garden. And from there it parted and became 4 river heads. There is your 1-to-4 ratio again. 1 river into 4 rivers. And the 4 rivers are the Pishon, the Gihon, the Hiddekel, and the Euphrates. And there's plenty of theological discussion that we can drum up on those 4 rivers alone. But we're going to have to save that for another time and place for our study. This is just the beginning of understanding this 1-to-4 ratio as found in Hebrew Scripture. And we're going to come back and continue our lesson on the next episode and talk further about these ideas of 1-to-4 and show you how they manifest themselves through all of Hebrew Scripture, all in regards to the formation of man, or Adam. In the meantime, I want to thank you for joining us on today's episode of Torah on Location. I'm Avi Ben Mordechai, and we will continue, Yah willing, to look at our study of the language of numbers. And on the next episode, we're going to talk about the 4 elements of creation. We're going to talk about the 4 states of matter, the 4 seasons, the 4 directions, the 4 principles of the material world. You're going to see this 1-to-4 ratio showing up everywhere in Hebrew Scripture. There's something absolutely unbelievably fascinating with all of this that we're looking at. Come along on our journey from Eretz Israel as we look at the language of numbers. I'm Avi Ben Mordechai. Shalom from Torah on Location in Eretz Israel.